Today on Fortnite, I got second place. I was so close.
Mom, will you get me a snack?
Mom! It's time for adult conversation. With me, your host, Brandy Ferner. Hello, Adult Conversation podcast listeners. Welcome to part 2 of Getting Pantsed by 2020 with Ronnie. In this episode, we're validating a possible lack of goals for 2021 since we're all just trying to make it through. We also talk about the various layers of stuckness that many of us moms feel, and I share an unexpected, maybe even embarrassing insecurity that this pandemic brought forth. Ronnie and I also discuss the reshuffling of friendships this year, and also how we found our ride or dies, as well as some hard, humbling lessons and small things that are giving us hope and bandwidth for 2021. In part 1, we talked candidly about how 2020 changed us, and how that affected the way we're moving into 2021 and plotting out our goals for the new year, if we're doing it at all. Before part 1 ended, the super wise Ronnie talked about how she's changing this year's goals to be less outcome-focused and more intentional on what she can control, even in a pandemic, which might be very little. I really loved this idea of distilling things down, and just as the episode ended, Ronnie was giving some words of warning, which will continue now. On to the show.
For me, it took the rug getting completely ripped out from under me for me to realize exactly what I can and can't do. I can write this book and get it to whatever point of I say done, it's done. I can't make a publisher buy it. And so instead of me saying like, I'm going to be a New York Times bestselling author, Oprah's going to call me, like all of that, I now am like, okay, my part ends here. My job is to get it here and let it go.
Right.
So here's the other piece of that, though, because I don't want you or me to sell our dreams short. So here's where I'm at. There are the concrete goals or things that I would be apparently willing to do during a pandemic, like continue to work on my book kind of thing. But there are also the dreams. So I think it's important to have those dreams too. So I still have that bestseller dream, but I'm not putting it as something that is on me. I have to get the manuscript written. Then I can maybe have that dream come true, but that dream is outside of it's not part of my list, it's part of my dreams.
Right.
The last thing I want coming out of this is for all of us to be like, next year I'm going to organize the kitchen. Like, I don't want people making safe goals. Like, I think we've been safe enough. Like, we still have to dream. For God's sakes, we have to dream. It's all we have right now.
True.
So those are very, very important. And I feel like in some ways, our dreams are what have held us together through this. It's one of those things where it's like, I need to have these things that are keeping me going and feeding me creatively and feeding my soul and feeding my spirit. But I also need to have things that I can achieve.
Yes.
Instead of what I have done in the past, which is kind of merge the two and been like, my dream for 2021 is a top 10 album. I don't even sing,
Right.
like all this stuff.
Right.
Collaboration with the remaining Beastie Boys where I fill in for
Right.
MC8. No.
Right. I'm going to win American Idol. I'm not going to try out, but I'm going to win it. Yeah.
I'm going to win the Boston Marathon. No, I can still have those dreams, but I need to have them in a separate place.
Right. They can't be treated with the same, they can't have the same weight.
Right.
I feel like. And they just have they hit differently.
They are. So my achievable list is the vegetables that you eat to keep you healthy. Your dreams, that's the cake you eat sometimes. But you got to have it because that brings you joy.
And I was thinking about how I love that I basically said how ridiculous it was to ask somebody how they've changed and then asked that and then you answered it. It was just in such a shrouded
and I like how I called
way.
it out. Like, that actually is ridiculous and here's my answer.
Right. And I do remember when you were answering it, there was a point where you're like, what I've learned about myself. And I'm like, oh my God, I totally did ask her this. This is where we're going with this. But I will say that one of the things that happened for me this year and what I'm looking at in 2021, aside from this, I love this idea of the list having different weights and, and letting go of the outcome for some things. Like, I really love that. And I feel like I'm coming at it. I had such pie in the sky dreams last year. And this year I'm like, I need to get enough water. I basically am like treating myself like a house plant. I need enough water.
Yeah.
I need adequate nourishing food. I need enough sunlight, and I need activity, like outside activity.
Yep.
And so I feel like what I want this year is so small. It's not any of the big stuff, even though when I really sit down and do my list, I'm sure there'll be bigger through lines for career stuff or, my work and writing and whatever, maybe. But I feel like that's one of the things that's happened to me is I've distilled down to I want to feel stable and I want to have enough bandwidth because especially, I don't know if anybody else out there was feeling this with the holidays, but I have felt like, oh my gosh, I'm hanging by a thread and I'm scared of what happens if that thread breaks. Like to get to the point where you feel like, we've all been saying this whole time, oh my God, I have no more bandwidth. I am just totally gassed out. But so I'm trying to get to the place where I don't find out what I feel like and what it looks like when I am completely gassed out. So I feel like everything has gotten very small for me, which actually feels good. Mm-hmm. And trying to figure out how does one get extra band or width? I don't know which is the thing I'm trying to get to, like, is it band? I think it's more band, but width of band, I need more of it. And I'm trying to figure out how to do it. And so I've come down to the most basic, like, what does a human body need to function? And then hopefully I'm going to build from there, but I feel like it's okay if our goals, which is so different, this list that I have from last year, if our goals this year are very, very small, obviously the dream goals can still be there. But I just want to validate for people who feel, because I almost feel like it's a little bit of a luxury to be able to even have these bigger picture things when many people feel so flattened by this pandemic and how long we've put up with it. And even thinking about this next year and like, what will it bring? Will it be harder than 2020? I can't imagine, but who the hell knows? So I just want to validate for people that, like, if you're just trying to get by and this whole idea of having like a list that you want to manifest is, that there's like a little bit of privilege and luxury in that.
Well, and I think what I'm hearing you say too with, treating yourself like a houseplant. I feel like for a long time, moms in particular, we've been at the bottom of the list of taking care of ourselves, and self-care is a whole separate, like, I can barely say those words because they just leave a very bad taste in my mouth.
Oh, really?
Yes, like, no.
I know. Tell me more.
Really? I've never heard that before. So what I think I'm hearing you say is your goal for next year with the houseplant analogy is to care for yourself in such a way that you strengthen the foundation from which all of your goals and all of your dreams will come from.
Exactly. It's an acknowledgement of where I'm actually at in this moment and feeling like I can just be on autopilot and do my list for 2021 and think about what are the things that I want to achieve, but I need to take a pause for a minute and check in where I'm at. Because it doesn't make sense to make a list of all these things that I want to have happen if I'm not acknowledging who I am as I'm about to try to do those things. And so maybe some of those things have to change. And like I said, maybe my list for me gets a little bit smaller to help tend to me, and exactly like you said, so that I can't even achieve any of those things. But I think sometimes we do get on this autopilot of like, every year, what am I going to achieve? What do I want from this year? And maybe we need to stop for a minute and be like, how am I doing? Like, how am I doing with this? Like, we are in a new year, and I know everybody says like, fuck 2020 and whatever, but 2021 doesn't just automatically, it's not just different.
It's not going to get better immediately at midnight.
yeah, if we are building the plane as we're flying, like we don't just land in the airport of 2021 and it's all back to normal.
We're not landing in Aruba in 2021. No.
No.
It reminds me of when I was little and I was learning to ride my bike. And I would fall off my bike and fall off my bike. And finally I would fall off and like get up and my knees are scraped and my hands are bleeding. And I would be like, what am I doing? I need to do something different. Like this isn't working.
Right.
And so I would stop and I would think back through, okay, am I pedaling too fast? Am I leaning this? And those minor adjustments that figured it out. And I feel like we all have been knocked on our asses by 2020.
Yes.
And we have an opportunity right now to stand up and dust ourselves off and figure out what's working. And it's not mandatory. Like I'm not saying everybody needs to do this. For some people, it's super comforting. And the only thing keeping them going right now is to continue forward exactly as they have been.
Right.
And if that is one of your listeners, then Godspeed. Like everybody get through this however you need to get through this,
Yes,
100%.
yes.
But I think for some of us that like to overthink things and reflect a lot and spend a lot of time in our heads,
yes.
this is an opportunity or a moment where we are in the middle and we can both look back and look forward and almost course correct mid-flight. What are the things that we want to change ever so slightly right now just to keep things going?
Exactly. That's where I'm thinking, because I'm usually thinking big picture. All
Right.
my lists are always this big picture
Right.
thing. And all of a sudden this year I'm like, ooh, I just need a couple small things and I
Right.
want to build more bandwidth. And, I really like, it's more of this like still survival mode thing. Like I just
Yes.
want to keep having enough rope, to keep pulling me through and keep pulling me through. I think that can be hard for some people to feel okay about because it feels like, well, I've lost all hope. But it's
Right.
like, well, this year we're different and it requires something different of us, and that's okay.
We also live in a society that for a long time, being busy and being engaged in everything was a status symbol. And that has been completely pulled out from us. And so now we're all sitting in a place where there is no busy, or it's a different busyness. I don't feel like I have things that just fill my time. Everything sort of has a purpose because of going back to that intentionality. Spontaneity is kind of on hold right now.
Yes.
And so all of that together has put us in a place that our status or how we viewed ourselves in the world has been almost shattered to some degree. And without that, it's people, myself included, are like, wait a minute, well then, if I'm not this busy person that's doing this, this, and this, who am I?
Exactly.
Which I don't know anybody that needed an existential crisis on top of the murder hornets of 2020, but I feel like we got
Right.
that too.
No, I think that that's right. It's a lot of this questioning, who am I, when all
Yeah.
these things fall to the side,
Mhm.
or when I have to shift.
Right.
I think the identity crisis, I think is, it's like, we didn't really need that. And I think along with that too, with some of the identity crisis came this idea of feeling stuck. And it's it's literal because
Yeah.
we're stuck in our homes. But then I think like what you were talking about earlier about control and realizing that there's so little that you really can control in this whole thing. And I think that that's been a hard lesson. And I think it's about our desire for control. But I also feel like what I keep hearing people say over and over again, moms specifically, is feeling stuck. And I know that I've felt it. And it's stuck in almost every way. It's stuck physically.
Mhm.
It's stuck like career-wise. This isn't a time when most things are blossoming and companies have lots of money or there's lots of opportunities out there. So it's like feeling stuck that way too. Feeling stuck with people. Feeling stuck, I wouldn't say in relationships, because I know that, I guess for some people, for some listeners who are in marriages that that are separated or divorced, I know a lot of people have felt stuck that way. But it's like, I know that I've felt that I'm somebody who I love clarity and then taking action. So if I get clarity about something, this is something in my life that needs to change, here's what I'm going to go do about it. But the action piece can't really be done and or felt like it this year. So like one of the things that was really hard for me, and I don't know if anybody else went through this, but towards the beginning of the pandemic, when it was like, we're all going to get this and people are dying and we sort of didn't, we didn't know some things yet. I was getting super nervous about like, what if I lost my husband? And this pandemic really brought up this insecurity in me that I cannot provide for myself because my husband is the breadwinner. And so I started like, I need to get a job. Even during the pandemic, like I'll work from home. I need to be able to provide for myself because what if something happened to him? What would we do? And then it's like I've always been super independent, always. And so it really brought up a lot of hard feelings for me about being a work at home, stay at home mom and how vulnerable that makes me feel. But then I felt stuck because I got a resume together, which by the way is a tough thing to do. I mean, I have stuff I can put on there, of course, about like writing and podcasting and things that I've done. But in terms of like all the shit that we do, like Ronnie, you and I were talking about how we could run a cartel, with all the skills that we have about hiding Christmas presents and magic and all of that. Like the amount of organization that goes into all of those things, like you can't put that on a resume. So anyway, that plus feeling like I'm trying to sum myself up here. And so much of the work that I've done that's been the hardest work of my life, like I can't even show on here. But then with the job market the way it is, like feeling super stuck there. So it's like, okay, so I can't help myself. Like it felt like every door I tried to open, it was locked. And that's an overwhelming feeling. I know I felt that this year.
Yeah, I did too. And I think you and I talked about this because my husband is also the breadwinner. And I started having, like, I would wake up in the middle of the night in a panic of like, what are we going to do if he gets sick? What are we going to do? What are we, like, literally, what are we going to do? And I went so far. I have a good friend who is an estate attorney, and I called her in a panic. And I was like, I need you to tell me what happens. What do I do if this happens? What do I do if he gets in the hospital? What do I do if he dies? I need you to tell me the next steps because I have to know what they are.
Right.
And she was like, is he okay? I was like, he's perfectly fine. And she's like, are you okay? And I was like, clearly not.
Yeah.
But this pandemic and the way we watched so many things around us collapse that seemed like they would never collapse.
Yeah.
Brought it home so personally and absolutely, like, I felt that urge too, like I have to bring in money right now.
Yes.
I need to like be working my contacts. So if something happens, I can be like, hey, I'm ready to jump back in.
Yeah, because it really made us look at what that would look like. So I'm thinking like, okay, if something happened to him, well, then I would need to get a job. But then I think what was making it worse for me is I was already trying to get a job. I think I was probably grasping at straws. But anyway, I was sending out resumes and looking for things that were a fit, which by the way, my skill set is weird. And so it doesn't totally fit in like in an easy category, like, oh, you went to nursing school, you will be a nurse.
Right.
But that's the thing is, so I think I felt even more stuck because I was actually trying to do the thing that I would have to do if something happened to him. And nothing was happening. It was just stagnant. So I'm like, oh my God, like I can't get a job. So I can't make money. So I can't even, like, there's no action. I can take no action here. It felt like I was paralyzed.
All you could do was sit with that feeling and realize just how potentially exposed you were if something were to happen.
Right.
Which is a really shitty place to have to be.
Right. I mean, on top of, and this is like on top of all the other anxiety.
Oh, sure.
But yeah, I didn't expect that would bring that up for me. And then I went even like a deeper spiral and I was like, what the fuck am I doing with my life? Like I'm 40. How old are we? Are we the same age?
Oh, no, I'm the OG of this duo.
Oh, that's right. I'm like 43, and so I feel like I'm on the downhill side of closer to retirement than I am to when I started. I'm like, what have I done? I had all these like kind of like regrets about like where am I at career-wise, and like, oh really, Brandy, you're in this age and you couldn't provide for yourself? Where did you go wrong?
Oh yeah. That was a really fun 4 a.m. self-reckoning evening. morning
Yes.
when I was like, wow, Ronnie, you remember when you made all those fun choices to take these crazy jobs that you really weren't cut out for, but you thought would be a fun challenge? They add up to nothing.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yes. It's like, what do I have to show for my, like, not that
Right.
this is, what do I have to show for my life? What?
Right. Right. Like, people are like, so do you work? And it's like, well,
Yeah.
here are the laundry list of things I've done that really don't relate to each other at all. But I've had a lot of fun and I've had a wide variety of experiences. And it's like, that gets me nowhere. That gets me
Right.
nowhere. I'm overqualified for McDonald's and not really qualified for much else. Like, that's where it
Yeah.
gets me. It's one of these things that I did not expect that. I expected to be trying to keep my family safe, trying to keep myself safe. Nobody expected a pandemic, but once I was like, okay, virus, I didn't expect to have this reckoning with myself on who I am and where I'm at.
Yes.
And that seemed unfair, frankly.
Yes.
You can either throw a virus at me that we can't control and don't understand, or I can have an existential crisis. But putting the two of them together is not fair. And please don't also throw into that political unrest and racial uprising, because my empathy self will explode.
Oh my God. And on top of that, and you're homeschooling your children now.
I'm
like,
homeschooling my children
what?
with my mom and my mother-in-law both elderly and several states away. Like, yeah, please just, I should also then have to reckon with what have I done with my life and where am I going?
Exactly.
Sometimes I felt like the robots you see in movies, sometimes it like short circuit and like smoke starts pouring out of them and they just start like,
Yes.
that was me a lot.
And I feel like we weren't talking about a lot of this stuff, because I think it could be embarrassing. I think people, are embarrassed to say that they're questioning these things, which is, of course, why I want to talk about them so that other people are like, oh my God, I was going through that same thing, because it's a weird world right now, because you have your people that you talk to and you don't necessarily like see people. So you have your people, but then it's weird because then you look out in the world and there's like half of the people are living life as if like we're not in a pandemic. And then the other half are. And so it's this weird thing where you're like, well, which one is true? But you it's just, it can be disconcerting. It can feel like gaslighting. So then as a person who's at home having an existential crisis, watching other people like still go to parties and live their life normally, it's like, oh my God, what am I doing?
Right.
Have I just like completely lost my mind? But then the reality is like, no, these people are like not looking at the reality. I don't know. It's it's a wild feeling.
Well, and I think too, talking a little bit about like the people that you talk to in your relationships, I don't know about, you and I have talked a little bit, but I had some friendships, some long-term friendships that really shifted during this time. And so the things I thought I could count on, as my circle got smaller, as school was closing and my husband was working from home, like all those things the walls started to close in. I didn't expect that also to impact some of the relationships around me.
Right.
And so there were definitely times when it was like, there is nothing that's stable.
Right.
Like nothing was stable and remain like I'm not acting. They're not over. There are more days coming when nothing will feel stable for me, I'm sure. But those are really, really hard days. Those are the days that my anxiety is perched on my chest. I can't take a deep breath. I am brittle as like glass. I am raw, like I am seconds from tears all day. I end up laying on my couch watching baking shows because that is all I can consume to just, I'm counting the minutes until that day ends.
Yes.
Those days are hard. And even in those days, I have to parent and I have to help my child with school and I have to, I'm still a partner. I can sequester myself to some degree, but I also still have to show up. And those are hard, hard days. And those are the days when you want to lean on people. And I wasn't expecting some of those relationships that I thought I would lean on to buckle.
Yes, I think you're so spot on about having things that were stable, become unstable during this time of great instability. And I think that is, these are like all the different layers to the hardship of the pandemic. But I think having friendships and support systems, I mean, really, when you boil it down, support systems that you thought were there during this time cannot bear the weight of this. And, and you're seeing people in stress response. Right. And so, and I've realized too, there's a couple friendships I have that I didn't realize our friendships really only existed when there was zero tension in the world, like in the bigger picture, like, oh, wow, we aren't the kind of friends that's like, just like a ride or die. I think that's really what it boils down to. It's like you find out who your ride or die people are. I mean, and there's the grief with that too, of losing what you thought were support systems that become clear to you that they're not. And so again, it's like this pandemic just has a way of breaking away every little thing. Okay, like this one. Okay, so now the next thing she holds dear, we're gonna break that away. Right. Just until you're just like, I've got nothing left to stand on.
I feel like 2020 was the gauntlet. We are all running the gauntlet right now, where we are just like leaping flaming chasms and like shit's falling away under our feet.
Yes.
And, I think there's going to be something going into 2021 where this is going to sound crazy, but these smaller lists that you and I are talking about, where we're recognizing the foundation or the things that we can absolutely control. I suspect, and I'm certainly not trying to sugarcoat anything because 2020 was a shit show, but I suspect that on the other side of this somehow, I'm going to have an appreciation for things that I never even noticed before.
Yes.
And relationships and people finding ways to show up for each other, even in the middle of all this.
I agree. And it's funny that you say that, because I've been thinking about that a lot, about when things start to go back to normal. I feel like we will be so much happier than we've ever been by the smallest things.
Yeah. And I feel like for me, I didn't realize how much I was taking for granted. Like, let's be real. This pandemic, among the many things it's done to many of us, really cut me at the knees and like humbled me. I probably needed a good takedown from this. And it was handed to me well, and the appreciation now of genuine people doing kind things and being good to each other and those kind of things, I had just forgotten the beauty that was there.
Mm.
So a friend called a few weeks ago and was like, I want to come over and see you. And so I set up chairs in my front yard. Like this is the intentionality. She was coming around 4 at like noon, because thankfully it wasn't going to rain. I put the chairs out so there'd be plenty of time for them to air before she sat. You know what I mean? Like, you're just,
right.
Even though we're outside, we're like 10 feet apart at least. We're both wearing masks. I'm like seated. She pulls in the driveway. She sits down. I started to cry.
Oh, I bet.
Because of the idea that I knew all the precautions she had to take to come to sit in my front yard. And she also knew all the precautions and all the actions I had taken to make this 45 minutes shooting the shit in my front yard happen. And it was just, it was, I'm getting teary now, but and I'm not going to say it's stupid, but it's stupid. But it's the idea that in the past when people would stop by, it just didn't really, it was nice, whatever. But now it's almost like I've been given a view into what it takes for someone to do that. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally. And it's like, this person values you so much.
Yes.
That they're willing to do these extra things. And I think that is one of the clarifiers during this whole time. And I know for me, some of my friendships, it was like very clear, very quick, who was like, oh, I won't, like, you're not worth wearing a mask for. Basically, I wouldn't even change anything.
Right.
If you required it. If hanging out with you made me have to change anything, I'm not going to do that. And it's like, oh, wow. Well, thank you in a sense, because it's like, that's really clear, like how important I am to you. And like what you're saying with this friend, that this friend would go through all of this, and then it's almost like an evening of like the friend says like, I will do all of these things so that I can see you, and then you're like, I will do those same things. It's almost like a math equation.
Yes. And I mean, I had everything turned out fine, but I had a pretty significant health scare in the midst of the pandemic as well.
Oh gosh,
And
yes.
I had a friend who I was seeking counsel from for some things, who offered to come. Of course, they won't let you in the hospital here at all if you're not the patient or being tested or anything. She was willing to come and sit in the parking garage while I was inside, just so I knew someone was there. And it's those kind of things that I think I would have been like, well, that's sweet, you know. But now, the idea of people willing to take those steps in the middle of all this, I don't know that I will ever take those kinds of kindnesses for granted again.
Yeah, that's so big. And it's almost like a shift in, and I don't want to sound like there's toxic positivity here, but it's almost like the shift from the relationships that fell through, or the clarity that we got that somebody, we didn't, we're not as important to somebody, and whatever. That's like, I'll try to say that without a judgment. That's like, well, that just is. It
Right.
just is. And I got that information and whatever. But it's like to focus more on the people who were willing
Right.
to do what it takes to continue a friendship. Like that is really the gift, is the clarity of who are those people.
And for me too, it was reckoning with myself on who am I willing to do that for?
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Because definitely, and I'm definitely not trying to make it sound like I'm some sort of great slice of bread or anything, because I, looking back, was probably like part of the reason I think these things were so touching to me was at a reckoning that I had not always been a great friend, and maybe had been a bit of an asshole sometimes, or a lot of the time, to some people. And so realizing that I was worthy of someone putting that effort in, even if I was phoning it in at times,
Yeah.
was really humbling. And it was also, like I said, like it was a mirror to me of like, you're kind of an asshole in this friendship. Do you realize that? And then it was like, shit, I am. How do I fix that? Do I want to fix that? What does that look like?
Wow, that's interesting. Yes, totally. And that's why I say with the friendships that I've had the clarity on, it's like there's almost no judgment there, because it's like I'm sure that there's people on the other end who maybe have felt that way about me as well. And it's kind of like a reshuffling.
Right. And I always thought I was someone who had an awareness of, because I tend to feel other people's feelings so keenly,
Yeah.
I always thought I understood where someone else was coming from. And I don't know shit. Like, if anything, that has been very clearly spelled out to me, that I have so much that I thought I knew that I didn't. And it was probably good that I learned that.
I am with you. I feel like my self-assuredness definitely got like cut off at the knees, just about anything. I mean, and even for the longest, even now, but for the longest time, I watched people have such a strong take on pandemic and the virus and all these. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how people can be so sure that it's like nothing, but then can also be so sure that it's going to kill all of us. Like, I found myself so in the middle trying to figure out and being like, wow, I don't even know anymore. Everything, this was such an unexpected thing, that everything that I thought I knew, like, turns out maybe I don't. So I'm with you on feeling like I got the self-assuredness slapped out of me. And I think I'm trying to come back from some of that and figure out, what do I pick back up and what do I let go of? I'm like trying to find my posture again, and I haven't found it yet. Honestly, I still feel like I went through and I'm going through a time where I'm like, is the work that I'm doing, is it even matter? Like, what, part of the, what the fuck am I doing with my life? It's like, what is this really the most important thing? So I just keep trying to be guided by what is getting me through and things that I'm interested in. But there's a whole bunch going on under the surface of like, what am I here for? And what is of value? And, those are all big questions to have, when everything underneath you feels like, not everything, but many stable things under you feel like they're crumbling.
Yeah, I feel like I thought I had a really good grasp on who I was and where I was headed.
Yeah.
And then 2020 was like, no,
Right.
you have no idea. And I mean, I feel like 2020 pantsed me, essentially. Like it showed my ass to the world. And now I have to deal with the fact that everyone has seen my ass. Like literally, I was pantsed by 2020. Like
Yes.
it's all out there. We were all pantsed. Like it's out there.
I am literally writing down the name of this episode is going to be called Getting Pantsed by 2020.
That's what it feels like. Because, I mean, I don't know if you've ever been pantsed, but afterwards you feel pretty vulnerable. Right? Like, it's the worst. It's because it's unexpected. You try to laugh it off because you're like, funny joke. But your pants are at your knees, and you're trying to fix it as fast as you can. And everybody saw it, and it's mortifying. And then you're supposed to go to math after that. Like, what the fuck? No!
Could kids get away with pantsing each other in this generation?
Oh, God, no. Are you
But
kidding?
I mean, that was like a normal daily thing when I was in middle school.
We watched a movie with our son, and I can't remember which one it was. It might have been, it was like the Ferris Bueller-ish kind of thing. And somebody got pants, and I shit you not, he was like, you can't do that.
Yeah, he's right.
And I was like, it was a different time. Like, what do you say? Like, and that's what it feels like. Like, we all came into 2020 with swagger, and then it just fucking pantsed us. And here we are, trying to pick it up and go to math now. With all the people that just saw us. Like, it's, and I am intentionally choosing math because that's not a forgiving subject.
No, it's not. You can't go talk about the Pythagorean theorem after you've had your underwear exposed.
Yeah, you can't. I think at the end, when I look at 2021, I'm just going to try to keep my pants on.
This is the house plant, the small plan.
Yeah.
But I do think also in closing, like, I think the thing that I keep finding as something that is giving me band or width,
yes.
width of band. Why do I not know? It's band, right? Right? Wouldn't band be the thing I'm looking for? Or band, I mean, I know bandwidth, but...
You are actually looking for width of the band.
That's okay.
You want a wider band.
I want a wider band. So as I'm looking for that, the thing that is giving that to me are little pieces of hope. Like, and they can be tiny, but I'm really realizing that even wanting to do a list like this or some sort of something for 2021 is the thought that there is something to keep showing up for. I mean, I know this sounds dark, but I mean, really, it's like there's that I believe that this year there will be things to show up for.
Yes.
And that there are things that I want. Like those acts of hope, even though they're so small, are so big. And like, I know I've told you this story, but I'm going to tell it here, that gave me such unexpected hope. But my son has a girlfriend, and they're just, I know it's adorable. And they just text, like they don't see each other, but they knew each other from school. So for Christmas, he got her something and she got him something. And so they wanted to like drop off the thing. So I drove my son to her house, and then he had on his mask and she had on hers, and they were, they did their 6 feet apart thing. But so he's walking up there to her front door, which we've never been there. They haven't seen each other this whole time. And I'm like, oh my God, this is a really big moment. This is like his first girlfriend, first gift, first time seeing her since they've become boyfriend and girlfriend. And so I see him, and he's like puts his bag down. She puts hers down, and I can see he's like trying to be cool or whatever. And so he comes back to the car, and he just has this smile on his face. And I was like trying to hold it together. I was near tears because I felt both things, but I felt these are the moments that are still out there for us, and we're frozen. We're just frozen. And I mean, there are some people out there, and maybe even some of my listeners, who are like, well, we're still fucking getting those moments. We don't care about this pandemic or whatever. So I know that there's people out there still getting these moments. But for me, it was somebody who is, a little bit more reserved about it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is that life that's out there for us. And it just gave me such hope that, like, I feel like we forget when we bring it really small how much big is also out there. I know we need to bring it small for certain times and things, but that moment gave me so much hope. And then also grief, because I thought there are so many moments like this that I know for him, this kind of a moment is something that is just frozen and it's like, it's just being postponed, right? So
Right.
we got to have it, but for some people, there are moments that are lost. Like, you know,
Yeah.
people who are like their senior year of high school, like some of those, there are some things that people have lost that cannot be replaced, that cannot be
Yeah.
postponed. And the frozenness is like, they'll never get it back. And so in one moment, I felt so much excitement for him, so much hope, and then also grief, which I feel like, you know, is 2020, all of those things.
Right. Those moments of hope, they become almost subversive. Like they're the stubborn little markers that lead us through this.
Yes.
And it's
Yeah.
that moment of like, everything around me is on fire and fuck it, I am going to have this tiny shred of hope right now.
It's right. It's the breadcrumbs to the destination.
It
where
is.
You're like,
It
oh my
is.
gosh, there's one more. Okay, here we keep
Yeah.
going. And you don't know where it is and you don't know how long, but it's the thing that keeps you fed. Like those little moments are everything. And so I think too, that is one of my moving forward, one of my small view things is like finding those moments of hope. Doing things, and maybe that's what I think about as I'm making the list, is like, what are things that I can do that give me the hope payoff?
Right.
Where have I found hope this year? Where are those moments and how do I get more of them or similar ones? I think is
Right.
going to be something that's on my mind.
Yes. And I think for me going forward, one of the things that has carried me through that I will continue to cling to as if it is the life preserver that is holding me on these tossing seas is just the honesty and vulnerability of the people around me to say things like this, to say, this is really hard and I feel lost and I thought I had this all figured out and then this hit and I don't.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I really didn't have it figured out before, but I was probably lying to myself. And the pandemic just showed me that. Like the
Right.
reckoning with the reality, I'm here for that all day long.
Yeah.
So going
Same.
forward, I'm looking for the people that are like, this place is a shit show. And did you see how pretty my flowers are? Like,
Right,
I want people that are
yes.
holding both of those things. And you and I have talked a little bit about, I never understood before this how people going through war could do things like get married and have children and have these moments of joy until we're in the middle of this. And I realized that the most stubbornly independent thing you can do is to find those moments of joy.
Exactly. That's that hope. That's like amidst everything feeling like it's falling apart, I'm still going to plant a garden because I believe we're going to be here to
Yes.
see it grow.
Yes. And I will leave you with this tiny little thing that I did not expect to be grateful for in the middle of all this. Because my family has been together for 900,000 million days in a row, we now have the most esoteric, ridiculous list of inside jokes that no one will ever in a million years understand. That when our son gets married, committed, whatever, and I get to make a toast, I'm going to say a string of nonsensical words that no one's going to understand except for me, him, and my husband. And we are going to piss our pants laughing.
Oh my God. Yeah. Because it's like you guys are in the dorms together.
Right. But I think a lot of families to some degree are having that experience where you're going to come out of this with like these random inside jokes because
Right.
you have no one else.
Right.
And 20 years
Yes.
from now, you're going to look at your kid and you're going to say, have you tried to restart your door? And they're going to lose their minds. And you can't explain that to anyone. But those are also the gifts that I think that we will take from this.
Yes. Yeah, and it'll be interesting, you know, once we're out of this. That's what I'm so you know, I'm always jumping ahead, but I'm so interested in the once this isn't quite the same threat. It's like when we really get that moment to breathe and to look around and to have some joy and, you know, happiness and like, oh my gosh, we made it through, is like what we really, how we make meaning out of this.
Yeah.
I'm always, you know, I'm the person that like in the middle of my cesarean was like, how am I going to come out of this? What am I learning? You know, but I'm also
Right.
like, and my abdomen is open, but I'm also trying
Right.
to make meaning while it's happening, which again, I feel like is an awful thing to do, yet I'm predisposed to doing. So.
Right. I would love it if next year you and I listened to this podcast again, like at this time next, like the end of 21, and then talked about what we heard, like our precious selves now
No,
at the
this
end of
means that we're
21.
going to get pantsed again all year.
Maybe, or maybe we're going to be like, dude, we were like in the middle, like listen how dark we were. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think it'd be really interesting to sort of reflect back on this and be like, that was us in the middle. And here we are now.
True. It would be great to see how far we've grown, or just to document sort of the dark parts of it.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm so happy that we finally got to do a full, proper episode together. You are one of my lifelines, and I feel like our friendship has been such an unexpected gift of not just the pandemic, but just of adult life. You know, it's not easy thing to make friends in adulthood that you feel like you've known for your whole life. So you're one of those for me. So thank you, Ronnie.
Well, I feel 100% the same. And I will also say that I think the fact that you and I have managed to build this friendship with you in California and me in North Carolina, and you and I only actually being in the same place once for 5 days,
right?
Like speaks to the fact when you are intentional and you're like, I'm going to put effort into this, the good shit comes out.
Or how desperate each of us were.
Or a pandemic happened and I was like, Brandy will talk to me and I need to talk to somebody.
Yes. Either way, however.
Right, whatever works. But it has been just you have been for me just a really safe place to feel this crazy avalanche of feelings brought on by the pandemic. And I'm so grateful to that. And I'm so grateful in the way that you bring your podcast guests to your listeners, not just as moms, but as people. And I think that's really important. And I think it's really valuable. And I'm very grateful that you do that.
Aw, thank you so much for that.
Brandy and I love each other, listeners. It's true.
Well, I have to say on my list from 2020 that I felt like maybe I did was I said high profile guests and continued meaningful and relatable content. So high profile, I don't know. I had some people from The Bachelor and Survivor on.
You had some high profile, yes.
I did. I had a Netflix star on. But more important than that, the continued meaningful and relatable content, like that just is most important to me. And as long as that is possible, I'm going to keep doing it. So thank you, everybody, for being along for the ride. And thank you, Ronnie.
Well, thank you.
I wanted to give you all an update on that list of things Ronnie lost during the pandemic in 2020 that she mentioned in part 1. She was planning on burning that list around the new year, but here's what she messaged me just a few days ago. She said, quote, "Turns out that I no longer view it as a list. It's a time capsule. It's a look at who I was when this all started. It's a reminder of all the little joys I took for granted that I never want to take for granted again. When I wrote it, it was about letting go. Now it feels like the way forward, the things I want, maybe my list for 2021. Instead of what I lost, it's what I want to find. So I didn't burn it." I kind of called that, I have to say. I figured that moment would happen, and I'm pretty sure it's because we share a birthday, so we were like connected through the frigging planets or something. But yeah, that feels pretty profound. The idea that what we lost last year could be our way forward this year. As always, thanks for listening.
Here